A widowed rancher thought his wife died years ago until twin girls walked in and called him Daddy. Wyoming Territory, late summer, 1008, 187. The afternoon sun pressed down like a hot hand, smearing the prairie horizon in hues of brass and dust. Caleb Rohr stood by a leaning fence post, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hammer in hand. The wood was dry and cracked, stubborn beneath his grip. He wiped the sweat from his brow, turning slightly to fetch another nail, and froze. Two little girls stood at the edge of his property. They were no more than 4 or 5, dressed in sun-bleached cotton dresses, a size too large, with matching curls tangled around their cheeks, barefoot, dust-covered, clutching a single faded satchel between them and staring at him like they had seen a ghost. One of them stepped forward, chin trembling. "Are you our daddy?" Caleb didn't move for a long second. Even the wind forgot to blow. His heartbeat thudded once, twice, then roared like hooves in his ears. He stared at the girls, then slowly set the hammer down in the dirt. He crouched to their level, his voice low and steady, though his chest felt anything but, "What's your name, sweetheart?" The same girl replied, her voice a hush of breath. "Ellie, and that's June." She pointed at her sister, who gave a small, shy wave. "Mama said, if anything bad ever happened, we should find the man who smells like wood smoke and rides like thunder. The one from her dreams." Caleb's mouth went dry. The words hit deeper than he expected. Too specific. Too close to something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Wood smoke and thunder. That was what Annabelle used to say when he came home late from the range. Boots dusted, saddle creaking, the scent of the trail still clinging to his skin. He looked closer. Same high cheekbones, same little furrow between the brows when they looked serious. And then he saw it dangling from a fraying string around Ellie's neck. A locket. His hand moved before his thoughts caught up. He touched it gently. "May I?" Ellie nodded. He opened the tiny brass shell with calloused fingers. Inside, on the left, was a pressed wild flower. On the right, a name etched in delicate cursive. Annabelle. His breath left him. It couldn't be. She had died 5 years ago. The fire on the passenger steamer from Missouri. He had buried what was left, identified only by the dress she was wearing when she boarded. That was the day the light had gone out of him. But here were pieces of her standing before him, asking if he was their father. Caleb stood, then gently reached for the satchel the girls carried. "You must be tired." Jun nodded solemnly, stepping closer. He pushed the gate open wider. "Come on, let's get you out of this sun." They followed without hesitation, one on each side of him. Ellie slipped her small hand into his. He didn't flinch. Inside the cabin, Caleb poured water into a basin and brought out a tin of shortbread from the back pantry. The girls sat quietly at the table, watching him with wide eyes. As they ate, he moved to the corner of the room, pulled open an old drawer. Inside lay a faded photograph of Annabelle, tucked beneath the corner of his Bible. He stared at it, then at the girls. It wasn't just imagination. They had her eyes. The storm inside him built fast. Could it be? Had she lived? He sat down slowly across from them, voice, "Where's your mama now?" Ellie looked down at her lap. Her answer came soft. "She got sick. She told us to come here. She said this was where home was." Caleb swallowed hard. His gaze fell to the locket again. Fire hadn't taken everything. Something had been left behind, and now it was sitting at his table. 2 sets of curious eyes watching him with hope. He leaned back, staring out the window. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. Somewhere deep inside, something long buried shifted. Caleb Rohr, widowed and broken, felt the echo of a heartbeat he thought had died, and it was calling him back. The sun still hung high when Caleb returned the girls to the small house after lunch. His boots left faint prints in the worn wooden floor as he sat down the basin in hot water, the smell of tea brewing faint behind him. Ellie and June sat quietly at a corner table, their fingers brushing at each other's cuffs, surveys of the unfamiliar place in their wide eyes. He filled a kettle from the stove, the hiss of steam interrupting the lull. He poured into 2 chipped mugs, one for the girls, one for him, and carried them outside to the shaded porch overlooking the yard. The heat pressed down from above, but in the shadow of the porch roof the air was cooler, scented faintly of pine. "Here," he said softly, handing each girl a mug. June accepted hers with small fingers. Ellie took hers, breathing the steam as though it whispered something she'd hidden. Caleb sat back. He said nothing. He watched them sip, their cheeks pink in the warmth. The afternoon light slanted over the yard. Shadows of cattle and fence posts long and calm. He thought of Annabelle. Caleb's throat tightened. He studied the girls. Their eyes held a question and a hope. Suddenly, from the house behind them, the sound of a rope being pulled caught his ear. He turned, walking toward the barn's corral, where he kept his saddled mare. He gave her a stroke and reached to tie the res to a post. As his fingers wrapped the leather, he caught a movement in the yard's corner. The girls stood side by side facing him. Ellie lifted 2 small fingers to her chest, index and middle, then to her forehead. June mirrored her, then both pointed toward him. Caleb froze. The coiled rope in his hand slackened. Sweat prickled his scalp. He remembered the sign, the 2 fingers to chest, then to brow, then pointing outward. He and Annabelle had done it once, twice, a silent way of saying, "I carry you in my heart, in my thoughts, and send you all my love." It was private, sentimental, a secret between them, when words were too vulnerable to be spoken. A pulse hammered in Caleb's ears. He let the rope drop. He stared at Ellie and June. The girls giggled, a soft mirrored giggle, then dropped their fingers and resumed sipping tea. Ellie said softly, "Mama taught us." She looked at Caleb. She said, "If we ever get lost and find a man who feels like home, show him this." She made the gesture once more. Mama didn't say his name. She just said if he saw it, he'd remember her. Caleb's breath caught. He closed his eyes, placed his hand over his face, dusty from the morning's work. He felt the urge to weep, not for himself, but for the chance he thought had ended. His wife living somewhere, their children alive and here. He opened his eyes. The girls watched him, their mugs half drunk now. He realized the tea had gone cold. He got up and stepped toward them. "What's your mama's name?" he asked quietly. "Annabelle," they said in unison, their voices small. Caleb's knees felt weak. He swallowed hard. He knelt again by the girls. "And how old are you?" he asked. "We're 4.5, June answered. 4.5, Ellie added, toes dragging in the dirt. Caleb nodded slowly. He took off his hat, sat on the wooden step, and laid it beside him. His heart hammered. For a decade he had buried the grief, the memory, the pain. But now something had cracked. In the air around him lay the faint scent of woodsome smoke, the same scent he recognized from nights on the range. When Annabelle would lean into him and breathe it in, he took Ellie's small hand, then June's, one each side, and pulled them gently onto his lap. He rested his arms around them. "I'm glad you found me." His voice deep but unsteady. "And I'm going to do whatever I can to keep you safe." They leaned into him, the afternoon sighing in the breeze, the porch boards warm under their feet, and though he would not admit it yet, heart he thought dead had begun to beat again. The next morning broke soft over Gentry Ridge, painting the barn roof in hues of amber and rose. Caleb stood at the gate watching his two unexpected guests know his daughters splash their way through the dew-wet grass, chasing a chicken that wanted none of their affection. "Easy there," he called, his voice steady but warm. Hen ain't going to lay no eggs if you scare the feathers off her. Ellie turned mid-chase, giggling breathlessly, hair tousled by the wind. She's real fast. Faster than you. Caleb asked. No way. June shouted from behind the coop. It was barely mid-morning, but Caleb had already taught them how to gather the eggs, sweep the chicken feed, and even showed them the spot where the best raspberries grew wild at the edge of the fence line. By noon, he was setting up the old saddle on a gentle mare named Clover. The horse had not been ridden in months, but stood patient as the girls approached with wide eyes. Ever been on a horse before? Caleb asked. Ellie looked uncertain. June nodded with all the courage of a 4-year old who didn't know what fear was. You ride up front, he said to June. I'll hold the reins with you. She beamed, and he lifted her into the saddle. He mounted behind her, arms around her slight frame, the reins firm in his grasp. The mare stepped off slow. The girls laughed as the horse plodded toward the low ridge behind the barn. He took them down to the river bend where the sun shimmered on the rocks, then back past the old orchard, the place where Annabelle used to pick apples barefoot. He remembered how she'd braid blossoms into her hair when spring came, and suddenly he saw it. Ellie peering up at him, the same eyes, same smile when she laughed too hard. He felt something shift in his chest, like a hinge long rusted, finally giving way. They spent the day outside. He chopped firewood while June stacked kindling with the focus of a soldier. Ellie tried to help but preferred dancing in the sawdust and drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. It was late afternoon when it happened. Ellie was running too fast downhill. Caleb shouted, but too late. Her foot caught a root and she tumbled hard onto the path. Dust flew. She cried out, sharp and sudden. Caleb dropped the axe and ran. She sat curled in the dirt, her knee torn open, blood streaking down her shin. Her lip trembled, but she didn't wail. She looked up at him as he knelt beside her, pulling a clean rag from his pocket. You're okay, he said softly, trying to keep his hands from shaking. She winced as he dabbed the blood. He wrapped her knee with the rag, tight but gentle. You're not mad? She asked in a whisper, tears glimmering. Caleb looked at her, then really looked. Freckles dancing across her nose just like her mother's. Never at you, darling, he said. His voice broke on the last word. Never. She leaned into him, small arms wrapped around his neck. June came up behind, hugging them both. They stayed like that in the dirt for a long minute, 3 hearts beating in rhythm beneath the wide Wyoming sky. Later that night, when the girls were tucked into quilts on the couch and the fire in the hearth crackled low, Caleb sat by the window, turning an old tin cup in his hand. His eyes kept drifting to the girls, sleeping, safe, real. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. But as he stared into the orange glow of the fire, a thought crept in, unbidden but undeniable. What if she's out there? The heart he buried 5 years ago was beating again, and this time it beat for more than just her memory. It beat for answers, for family, for love still waiting to be found. The morning Caleb rode into town. The wind was sharp with the scent of pine and distant rain. He hitched his horse outside the sheriff's office and stood for a long moment, hat low over his brow, before stepping inside. Sheriff Nolan looked up from his desk, surprised but not unkind. Well, I'll be damned, he said. Thought you'd turn to dust out there. Caleb didn't smile. I need your help. Nolan leaned forward, his face tightening at Caleb's tone. Talk to me. There were 2 girls, twins. They showed up at my gate 3 days ago. Said their mama told them to find me. Said their mom, his name was Annabelle. Nolan blinked, then straightened. You sure? Caleb pulled a small locket from his coat pocket and placed it on the desk. Inside, a tiny portrait of Annabelle stared back. They were wearing this. Nolan was silent a moment, then reached for a folder in the drawer behind him. Few years back, there was a report from Montana. Small clinic up near the border. Woman found injured after some kind of accident. Burns had trauma, didn't remember her name. Folks said she just appeared one day. Caleb's heart pounded. You have the location, Nolan nodded. It's a long ride, but if it's her, it's worth every mile. 2 days later, Caleb reached the faded clapboard building of an old outpost clinic, now half converted into a homestead. The nurse, an older woman with sharp eyes and a slow draw, nodded when he asked. She stayed here nearly a year. She said, didn't speak at first, would wake up screaming, covered in sweat, had nightmares so bad she'd claw the walls. Eventually, a family nearby took her in, good people, gave her a place to rest, where, Caleb asked, already tightening his res. The nurse pointed west, Hollowbrook Ranch, 3 mi that way, but she's been real sick lately, might not remember a thing. Caleb didn't answer. He just rode. The ranch was small, nestled in a low valley framed by cottonwoods. He saw smoke from the chimney, a laundry line with dresses fluttering in the wind. A young boy sat on the porch whittling. He looked up as Caleb approached. An older woman came out, wary but kind. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone, Caleb said quietly. A woman named Annabelle. The woman's expression shifted. She's inside, weak from fever, been like that for days. Please, I just want to see her. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and ash. Caleb stepped into the dim room, and there she was, lying on a narrow bed, skin pale, chest rising shallowly. His breath caught. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner. But it was her, Annabelle, he whispered. She stirred faintly, her eyes opened, hazy and unfocused. She looked at him without recognition. I'm sorry, she said hoarsely. Do I know you? He swallowed, voice breaking. Not anymore, she blinked. Have we met? He nodded. Once a long time ago outside, the door creaked. Caleb turned as the woman from earlier entered with a soft sigh. She never knew she had children, not until the girls showed up. They must have slipped away while we were tending the fire last week. Caleb's stomach turned. They came looking for me. Thought she was dying. She still might be, the woman said gently. Caleb sat by the bed, reaching out, but didn't touch her. He looked into the eyes that had once held all the world for him and saw nothing but shadows now. But he stayed because something deep in his chest told him the light wasn't gone, just waiting. The days moved slow at Hollow Brook. The fever had passed, but Annabelle's strength was fragile, like petals soaked in rain. Caleb never asked to stay. He simply did, fixing fence posts, feeding chickens, drawing water before dawn, quietly present like an old tree that had always been there. When asked who he was, he simply replied, Caleb, a friend passing through. Annabelle watched him with cautious eyes. There was something familiar about the way he moved, how he tied a rope, how he stirred his tea without looking, but she said nothing. Not yet. She did not trust easily. The world had frayed that instinct long ago, and now with the children gone looking for someone she could not name, her fear sat in her throat like a stone. At night she would lie awake listening to him, moving about outside the house, tending to chores no one asked him to. He never cried, never lingered too close, and that somehow made her more weary. But there were moments, small ones, like the way he laid the mug down beside her one morning, not in front of her, but slightly to the left, just the way she used to prefer. Her hand paused mid-reach, puzzled by the comfort of the gesture. Or how, when her hair fell across her eyes as she chopped vegetables, he instinctively reached to tuck it behind her ear, then stopped, hand frozen in the air as if burned by memory. He turned away quickly, murmuring something about needing more firewood. At twilight, she saw him brushing one of the horses. The light hit him just so, and she stared longer than she meant to. That scent, leather, pine, and something warmer washed over her like a forgotten song. One afternoon, while folding laundry on the porch, Annabelle asked the older woman who had taken her in, "Why is he really here?" The woman just smiled. "You ask like you don't already know." Annabelle didn't answer. She only stared out at the pasture, heart drumming strange rhythms in her chest. That night, the air turned cold early. Caleb offered to sleep in the barn loft. Annabelle said nothing, but watched him climb the ladder with quiet eyes. Later, near midnight, the house stirred. Annabelle cried out in her sleep, thrashing beneath the quilt. Her voice rose, cracked, frantic, lost. "No, no, the fire, Caleb." She jolted upright, drenched in sweat, gasping. In the dark, she felt a presence, not looming, but calm, a steady weight. Caleb stood in the doorway, hands clenched at his sides, not daring to move. She blinked at him, dazed. "Why do I know your name?" His voice trembled, "Because part of you still remembers." She looked at him, breath shallow, tears cutting down her cheeks. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for meaning. "I see you in my dreams," she whispered. "You're always running toward me, and I'm always too late." He crossed the room slowly, knelt beside her bed. "You're not late," he said. "You're right here." She broke then into 100 pieces. Sobs shook her, and she reached out blindly. Caleb took her hands in his gently, reverently. She clung to him like a raft, crying into his shirt, and he let the tears fall onto her hair without wiping them away. He did not speak again that night. He did not have to, because in that moment, in the echo of her nightmare, she had spoken the name she did not know she remembered, and it was his. The wind rolled soft over the hills of Montana, bending the grass in waves like silent whispers. The sun had dipped low, throwing long amber streaks across the porch of the farmhouse where Caleb now spent most of his days, not to push, not to chase, but to stay. Annabelle sat on a rocking chair, blanket over her knees, a book resting unread in her lap. Her hair, no longer as neat, moved slightly in the breeze. Caleb from the steps glanced up at her, his hands busy carving the edge of a wooden frame. "You ever sit here before?" he asked gently, not expecting much. She looked out toward the barn, then toward the distant horizon, and shook her head. "Feels like I might have. That counts," Caleb said, and kept carving. In the days since he had come to the farm, he never once told her the whole truth. Not yet. He only spoke in stories, little ones, like the way she used to burn toast, but insisted it tasted better that way. The time she chased a goat down the riverbank, yelling words no lady would admit to knowing. How she once danced barefoot in a thunderstorm just because the thunder sounded lonely. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she didn't, but she always listened. He would make her tea each evening, cinnamon and mint, just how she used to like it. He never asked if she remembered. He simply placed the cup on the railing beside her and sat down nearby. One afternoon, while dusting the old bookshelf in the hallway, Annabelle pulled out a slim, weathered volume. Inside was a pressed flower, long faded, and a line written in curling script. "When your hands forget, let your heart remember." Her breath caught. The handwriting was hers. She flipped pages, poems, notes, recipes, all written in her hand. All completely unfamiliar, and yet unmistakably hers. Caleb walked in just as the book trembled in her grip. "Where did you find that?" he asked, voice low. "It was tucked behind the frame," she whispered. I don't know why I wrote this, but I did." He nodded, gave her time. She stepped closer, her eyes swimming. "This was mine. All of this was mine." Then her voice cracked. "Why don't I remember you?" His hands, rough and strong, closed gently over hers. "You don't have to," he said. "Not right now. I remember enough for the both of us." She looked up, and for the first time there was no fear behind her gaze, only confusion, hope, and something deeper. Annabelle opened the book again and touched a name scribbled in the margin. Her lip trembled. I think, she began slowly, painfully, I think I remember loving you. Caleb didn't answer right away. He pulled her gently into his arms, resting his chin on her hair as she cried quietly, brokenly, beautifully. He didn't need her to remember all at once. Love, real love, didn't beg to be recalled. It waited, and Caleb Rohr was a man who knew how to wait. The wagon creaked as it rolled through the familiar gates of Gentry Ridge under a skystreet with the soft golds of evening. Caleb held the res with one hand, the other resting over Annabelle's where it lay in her lap. She did not pull away. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, but her fingers curled gently around his. The scent of wild sage, the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods, it all came back like a song half remembered. In the back, Ellie and June sat pressed to the wooden sides, quiet for once, eyes wide as the landscape of their dreams became real. The ranch looked just like the stories their mother had told. Big open sky, a red barn leaning slightly with age, and a front porch wrapped in shade. It wasn't grand, but it felt like it had been waiting for them all this time. When they stopped, the twins jumped down before Caleb could lift them. Their boots hit the dirt and they ran. Mama, Ellie shrieked. Annabelle barely had time to open her arms before the girls collided into her. She crouched, holding them both, her face buried in their hair, breathing them in like the first clean breath after a storm. I knew we'd come back here, June whispered. I just knew. Caleb stood behind them, watching the three of them in the dust and late light. His throat tightened. He had dreamed of this once long ago, before fire and loss and years that seemed to eat the future whole. But now it was here, real and trembling in the hush of twilight. Later the house was quiet. Supper had come and gone. The girls tucked in a bed that used to be his. Their giggles had faded into sleep, their arms tangled like roots. Annabelle sat on the porch, shoulders wrapped in one of his old wool blankets. The moonlight caught the edges of her profile, making her look like the memory of a younger version of herself, gentler, but marked by everything she had lived through. Caleb stepped outside, something hidden behind his back. He cleared his throat. Found this in the attic. Last winter, thought it was broken for good. He brought the item forward, a simple wooden flute. Worn smooth by time and hands, he offered it to her. I fixed it. Thought you might want to try. Annabelle stared at it. Her fingers reached for the flute slowly, reverently, as though afraid it might vanish. She turned it over, brushed a thumb along the tiny carving near the mouthpiece. Her initials etched by Caleb's knife on their wedding night. She didn't speak, but her eyes did. She held it to her lips. The first breath was shaky. No sound came. Then the second, a faint note emerged. Tremulous and thin, she paused, took a deeper breath. Then came the melody, halting, imperfect, but unmistakable. A tune only they knew, the one she played for him in the evenings after supper, when they still lived like the world would never change. Caleb sat beside her, close enough to feel the music in his chest. His hand rested on the porch rail, then slowly found hers between notes. She did not pull away. When the song ended, Annabelle lowered the flute. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears of pain this time, but something softer. Recognition, peace. I don't remember everything, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But this feels like home. Caleb squeezed her hand. That's all it has to be. Months passed like slow-moving clouds over the ridges of Gentry. The days grew cooler, but peace settled deep into the bones of the land and into the hearts of those who called it home. Annabelle's cheeks had color again. Her steps, once cautious and faint, were now steady as she moved through the kitchen, hair pulled back with a blue ribbon. Ellie and June followed her everywhere, flour-dusted, giggling, proud of the pies they made, even when the crusts crumbled. Out in the fields, Caleb taught the girls how to saddle a pony. He was patient, always stepping back to let them try on their own. When they fell, he knelt beside them with dust on his knees and kindness in his voice. Try again. He would say, you're stronger than you think. One morning, Caleb stood outside with a hammer and chisel. Wood shavings curled at his boots as he carved a simple sign. By dusk, he hung it on the beam above the porch. It read, Ellie, June, and Annabelle. Welcome home. Annabelle found it after sundown, a pie cooling in her hands. She stopped, lips parting, eyes soft. Behind her, Caleb just smiled. Figured it was time folks knew whose ranch this really is. That night after dinner and lullabies, Ellie came to Caleb while he was cleaning out the fireplace. She held out a piece of folded paper, edges wrinkled, her face serious. I made this for you, she said. Caleb dried his hands and took it gently. Inside was a note in crayon, words crooked and large. Thank you for not forgetting her and for not forgetting us. The breath left his chest. He blinked hard, swallowed. He picked Ellie up, then June too when she ran over and lifted her arms. With both girls in his embrace, he turned toward the kitchen where Annabelle leaned in the doorway, dish towel in hand, watching them. Her smile was quiet, steady, the same one she used to have when he told bad jokes back when their world had no cracks. Caleb walked to her, holding their daughters. The lamplight caught in her hair. He looked at her. This woman he had mourned, then hoped for, then found again. They told me you died, he said, voice low. Annabelle reached up, brushing a curl from his forehead, her thumb trailing down his cheek. No, love, she whispered, eyes shining. I was just lost, but you found me. If this story made your heart ache, smile, or hold your breath, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. Love like Caleb and Annabelle's is not just born from vows exchanged under a sunset sky. It's forged in fire, tested by time, and stitched back together by quiet hands and the fierce hope of two little girls who dared to believe in more. It reminds us that family is not just a matter of blood, but of choosing one another again and again. Even after the world has torn everything apart, it is about the man who waited, the woman who found her way back, and the children who knew where home truly was. If you believe in second chances, in healing after loss, and in the kind of love that endures even when memories fade, then Wild West Love Stories was made for you. So go ahead, hit that hype button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell, because out here under open skies and quiet stars, love rides again, and we're just getting started.